I'm Angela Kelly Robeck, host of the Empowered Principal Podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Hey, welcome back. Steve here, and today I'm talking with Dr. Barbara W. Cirigliano. She was the principal of Willow Grove Kindergarten and Early Childhood Center in Buffalo Grove, Illinois for 17 years. She led the PLC implementation there. Our focus today is her book, Success for Our Youngest Learners, Embracing the PLC at Work Process at the Early Childhood Level. You're going to love this book. You're going to learn so much, and you're going to want to be able to put it in place today in your school. Thanks so much for listening. Oh, by the way, before you go, could you take a minute to help out the podcast? And I'm glad you asked. Well, how can I do that, Steve? Well, here's a couple ways. You could tell a friend, share the links. You could go to my website and leave a review and subscribe. And how about click on the link on my website homepage where it says Buy Me a Coffee. And by doing this, you could donate $1 or $2 to help me address the costs associated with producing the podcast. What do you think? That'd be so cool. Thanks so much. You are awesome. Enjoy the show.
PLC at Work process is where teachers collaborate to improve their classroom practice. They collaborate around 4 central questions that guide their actions. What do we want our students to know and be able to do? How will we know if they have learned it? What will we do if they have not learned it? And what will we do if they've already learned it? The PLC process at work involves a cycle of learning that includes analyzing data, setting goals, learning individually and collaboratively, and implementing and adjusting your practices.
It's the Education Podcast, your favorite show, with lots of groovy guests and they share what they know. So crank it up to 10 and let your neighbors know that here's another show with Dr. Steve Milletto. Teaching, learning, leading, K-12. Teaching, learning, leading, K-12. Teaching, learning, leading, K-12. With Dr. Steve Milletto.
Barbara W. Cirigliano, EdD, is the former principal of Willow Grove Kindergarten and Early Childhood Center in Buffalo Grove, Illinois. She has more than 40 years of experience focusing on early education, elementary education, and special education. At Willow Grove, Dr. Cirigliano led the implementation of a professional learning community. Along with her staff, she created a collaborative culture and developed a guaranteed and viable curriculum supported by the Common Core state standards. Their creation of common assessments and a pyramid of interventions has built the foundation for student learning in this high-performing district. The National Association for Young Children has accredited Willow Grove for the past several years. This rigorous accreditation process identifies high-quality early learning programs in schools. She is the author of Success for Our Youngest Learners. This book outlines the major concepts of PLCs and makes it clear how educators of young children can apply and use these concepts in early childhood settings in order to fully integrate with the whole school or whole district PLC. Willow Grove has also been highlighted on the All Things PLC website. Dr. Cirigliano has a bachelor's degree in early childhood special education, a master's degree in educational leadership, and a doctorate in educational administration. She has presented at a variety of national conferences. Our focus today will be Barbara's book, Success for Our Youngest Learners, Embracing the PLC at Work Process at the Early Childhood Level. Barbara, thanks so much for being on the show, and say hi to everyone. Hi,
I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Great to have you on the show. And, I got to say really enjoy your book, learn a lot from it. And but before we go any further, I read in your intro that you have over 40 years experience in education. What is something that you learned during those earlier years that helped you work with children and their families?
One really important thing that I learned was that whenever I am making a decision about a child, about a program, about anything at my school, it was always in the back of my mind, would I want this for my own son or daughter? Would I want this for my own child? Would I want my child treated this way? My son was 5 years old. He was in kindergarten, and he came out of school one day crying because his arm hurt him because he was, and I said, why? He said, I'm filling in the dots on this paper. I called the teacher. He was 5 years old. They were giving him the Metropolitan Reading Readiness Test. Totally inappropriate for a young child.
Goodness.
That's not something I would want him to do. I called the teacher. She was like, "Oh, he's doing great. Um, we're really liking his progress." And I said, "Well, he's not coming to school for the next 3 days because you're not giving him this assessment." She's like, "Oh no, how will I know what he's learned?" And I thought, there's lots of other ways you can find out what he's learned when he's 5 years old. So I always keep that in the back of my mind. Would I want this for my own child?
That in itself is so powerful, and what a crazy situation you had to deal with.
Yeah.
It's so right on the money, because we have to think that way. If we don't, I mean, sometimes adults do some interesting things. So, we're going to focus on your book, Success for Our Youngest Learners, Embracing the PLC at Work Process at the Early Childhood Level. Let's share a few words before we go any further. When you use the term PLC, what does it mean to you?
Professional learning community. It's a group of educators who work together to improve their teaching and learning and to support student learning. It means that teachers focus on all the kids, not just their kids. Professional learning communities, they work together, teachers work together in collaborative teams to assure high levels of learning for all. When I started teaching in the 70s, I would walk in my classroom, shut the door, and follow the scope and sequence I was given. It didn't matter if they learned it as long as I taught it. So now the focus is on if they learned it. And we talk about 3 big ideas in a professional learning community: focus on learning, a collaborative culture, and results oriented.
Very nice. Very nice. All right. So let's define this. We mentioned a couple of different times the PLC at work process. So what is that?
PLC at work process is where teachers collaborate to improve their classroom practice. They collaborate around 4 central questions that guide their actions. What do we want our students to know and be able to do? How will we know if they have learned it? What will we do if they have not learned it? And what will we do if they've already learned it? The PLC process at work involves a cycle of learning that includes analyzing data, setting goals, learning individually and collaboratively, and implementing and adjusting your practices. This process allows teachers to try new teaching techniques and identify what works and what doesn't. It also creates an environment that encourages cooperation, emotional support, and personal growth. It's good for teachers. Teachers are no longer an island in their classroom. I was a new teacher, and the 2 other kindergarten teachers down the hall shut their doors too, and I didn't know what they were doing or why everybody liked them so much. So businesses have teams that work collaboratively. We should take from their example.
Oh, you're so right. Best teacher. I'm a former high school history teacher and assistant principal, and it's one of the things that as a teacher, I had the good fortune at one point to go from a traditional type high school to a high school that brought up many middle school concepts into the high school. So I worked on it. I got the best teaching I ever did was working on the team type focus and bringing that to the table, which is just powerful. But so many, it's just we're all on separate islands. You close the door.
Yeah, I know. Do your thing.
Exactly. All right. So kudos on your success at Willow Grove Kindergarten and Early Childhood Center. I mean, you were there for 17 years and the school was recognized as a model PLC. You had visitors from all over, and I believe you have experienced early childhood educators struggling to understand how the PLC process could be used with young children. Could you talk about that?
Well, 2 things. Early childhood educators have a fear of assessments because they think of the fill in the dots metropolitan reading readiness test. And they think of at 3rd grade, the standardized testing that children are given. And they also, we know that young children grow and develop at different rates. So teachers question, how can we assess this in a developmentally appropriate way? I get that all the time. It's not developmentally appropriate to assess young children. And the National Association for Education of Young Children says you can't assess them appropriately. So we first need to agree on what children should be able to do and what they should know at the ages of 3, 4, and 5. Especially, we need to agree on what we want them to know before kindergarten so that we can assess them appropriately. We can use different types of assessments, teacher-student conferences or interviews with a scripted set of questions and appropriate answers that the team agrees on. The team says, we're going to assess this skill. This is how we're going to do it. And we're going to do it all in the same way. You know, if you don't assess it in the same way, what happens is, I asked my kindergarten teachers once, how do you know if a child can write their name correctly? What's your criteria for that? Because that was something on the report card. And one teacher said, well, if I can read it, they've mastered it, they can write their name. The other teacher said, no. Has to be on the line, capital letters, small letters, finger spaces. And it's not equitable. And either way is right. Teachers just have to agree on that. And they were really shocked because when the one teacher said that, she was like, really? That difficult? And so they did come to a compromise, but that shows how assessment has to be really clear and you all have to be on the same page with assessment. We can assess young children at play doing specific activities and have a rubric that we've all made and agreed on that shows us if a child has mastered a skill. We can also look at the work they do. We can look at them in action. You know, can they skip? Can this 5-year-old skip? And what does mastery of skipping look like? So you could videotape your whole class doing it and then go back and look at that. You could look at work samples of, you know, things that children draw and do and play, you know, draw man, what has to be included when a child draws a man. So the assessment piece is the biggest backup to it, the biggest, you know, the biggest but I can't do this because we can't assess young children. So.
Well, I think that's, it's so important to establish that, like you're talking about, which is, what those assessments look like, what they can look like, and coming to an agreement that we should be figuring this out,
right?
So that we can understand where they are. I think it's so important to have those, because otherwise you'll get stuck in the weeds of like you said, that voice that's saying we should never do any assessments, or
right.
They come up with their own design that may not really be what you need to be doing.
Right. The first year I taught kindergarten, I did report cards in the back seat of a friend's car on my way to Duluth, Minnesota. And I'd go through and go, oh, Sam Cooper, does he know the letters of the alphabet? Yeah, he does. With nothing to back that up. Nice. I mean, and yes, teachers' own thought process and their own feeling about a student is important, especially in young children, because young kids can have a bad day. They can have not slept the night before. When you know a child can do this, but the day you assess them, they fail miserably. So teachers have to use their own insight into that as well with young children, even with older children. Did you have a big fight on the bus before you came to school, and so now Right. You're miserable? So I think that's important.
Oh, it so much is. It's one of the classics that I'll never forget with this student was that he was just doing terrible in this class on this day. Normally didn't do that. Well, it turned out that he had left his, those very expensive, very large calculators that cost around $100. He had left it for the second time. He had left it on the bus. And I had I was an administrator at the time, and I said, what's going on with you? I said, today I've gotten all these reports about how you're just kind of off the chain and different stuff. And I said, I've never had to talk to you about this. And he said, I'm afraid to go home. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, I left my calculator for the second time on the bus, and the first one didn't come back. The second one, what was awesome was that the bus driver had done had gone through the bus before leaving the bus and found the calculator. And so I had his calculator. which was cool.
Good for him.
Yeah, so he was very happy, and it changed, turned everything around. But
I said there were two things that make it difficult for teachers, educators of young children to be part of a PLC. Many times, early childhood programs, early childhood teachers, early childhood classrooms, special ed, early childhood classrooms are not part of the whole grade level continuum. My first year I taught early childhood special ed, I was out in a mobile unit. Talk about not being part of the whole school culture.
Right.
So many times early childhood teachers don't feel like they're part of that. They go to staff meetings and they're like, this doesn't pertain to me. My kids can't do this. My kids don't do this. It's not part of it. So it's important that professional learning communities include every single grade level. And there should be opportunities for early childhood teachers to collaborate with kindergarten teachers, with first grade teachers. In my school district, the principal of the middle school always thanked my staff for giving the young kids such a great start. She understood that they wouldn't be where they were if they hadn't had the opportunities and the great teaching they had when they were young children. So it's up to administration and leadership to make the early childhood teams, the early childhood teachers be part of the whole and not just down the hall or next to the boiler room or in a mobile unit outside.
Yeah,
I think that's really important.
Most definitely. I mean, I think about some of the, when you taught in the mobile units, you're off, you could be all over the campus. And especially if it rained or something like this, you may not even venture that frequently to the main building or something like that.
Right. So,
powerful. All right. So why'd you write your book? I mean, the book's called Success for Our Youngest Learners, Embracing the PLC at Work Process at the Early Childhood Level. I mean, because in order to write a book, you have to not only have an idea, you have to go through with the idea, and then you have to get a publisher. So why'd you write the book?
I wrote it because we had visitors to our school who said, yeah, but we can't do this. That's one of your other questions. We can't do this. And I wanted early childhood educators to see how they could be part of the PLC process that was taking place in their schools at the elementary grade level. I wanted them to see how it could be done. We were a separate building, an early childhood center, but my teachers met with elementary teachers. They collaborated with elementary teachers. I, as a principal of that building, collaborated with all the other elementary principals. We were all part of that. My aim in the book was to give directive and meaning to the PLC process for early educators, while providing answers to questions they had about the practice. To answer some of those, but. I think that was my main incentive. And if you see that it can be done, well, they could do it, so can I think is really important. We were one of the first I had the opportunity of the author of Learning by Doing, Dr. Thomas Maney. He was my superintendent. And
nice.
He always, we didn't even know we were doing PLC stuff until years later. But he always included me in everything, in every meeting, when we looked at data and everything that the elementary teachers did and the middle school teachers did, which I think was really important to feel part of that whole. And so many schools don't. We also had middle school teachers come and observe early childhood classrooms.
Nice.
To see what was going on, because they thought we just played. Oh, you guys just play there. All you do is play. And they were shocked. And I had my superintendent come and, be an aide in the classroom, one of the early childhood classrooms one year. It was a great experience for him. He really didn't want to ever come back because he pulled the plug on the water table and flooded the classroom.
Nice.
So, but I think that's important. I also went to middle schools to observe because I could never be a middle school teacher. Oh, I could never do that. But it's important to see what they do and how they work and what they deal with. because they're all part of the same big process, making sure that all kids learn to high levels.
Very much so. So important. So very important.
Yeah.
What was he doing? Just going, what does this do, by the way?
Yeah, what is this? And he pulled it up. I'm like, whoa.
Nice. I like that. All right.
But he also did see that we could do, we did response to intervention, and we moved 5-year-olds from classroom to classroom easily with ease. And he thought they would just be wandering all over the building. And so he was amazed at what they could do. So
that's so cool. All right, so let's get into your book a little bit. And you already given us a sneak peek at a couple of the things. And one of the parts I wanted to make sure we, and in this case, go back to, which is in chapter 2 of your book, The Building Blocks of a PLC. One of the segments is titled The 4 Critical Questions of a PLC. So let's talk about those questions now.
Okay. There are 4 critical questions of a professional learning community that teacher teams collaborate around. The first one is, what do we want our students to know and be able to do? Which is so important. The state curriculums give us a list of standards, and there's no way kids could learn all of them. They'd have to go to grade 22 to be able to learn all the state standards. And so you can teach them all, but they can't learn them all. And there's a difference between the teaching and the learning. So it's really important for teachers at each grade level to go over all the standards by them as a team and determine which are the most important ones. What do we need these children to know and be able to do? And there's a criteria for that. And there's a whole process, a protocol to be able to do that. You know, which ones are necessary for future learning. And it's also kind of a flowing document. My early childhood teacher spent a lot of time on shapes. Is a triangle and an octagon, are they both important? Which one's more important? Which one should we have? We know a circle and a square, but what about the diamond? So they learn a lot about the curriculum themselves when they talk about it that much. Usually they never talked about it. And my kindergarten teachers had the quarter in the essential standards and out of the essential standards, on and off, on and off. But when they talked to the first grade teachers wanted them to know that. And so that was really important. I also think that agreeing on what we want kids to know and be able to do, the first year I was the principal of the kindergarten center, I always looked at all the report cards, but the first batch of report cards I looked at were so different. This teacher really focused on letter recognition. This teacher really focused on numbers. This teacher focused on that. And so what happened is all those kids went to 4 different elementary schools with different levels of learning. And the first grade teachers were just in a flux. Some of the kids know their letters, some of them don't, and they had to figure all that out before they could begin their first grade curriculum. So now we send kids to first grade. We send kids to kindergarten, and we can tell the next teacher exactly what they know and what they're able to do. And we can also tell them, these are the 2 children that don't know all the letters of the alphabet, and you need to start day 1 on this. And these are the letters that they don't know. We get down to being very specific. So we're not wasting a lot of time, but it's, for the next teacher to try to figure out what kids know they're able to do. So it's about equity in education. The parents I want my child to have this teacher because we know that this teacher, the first grade teachers like, because the kids learn it all. And you've had those teachers come to you as a principal and say, it's the, student lottery. It's like a lottery. I want my kid to have this teacher. Okay. Make sure they get him because, we know that one's the better one. Not equitable. I see you're smiling.
Oh yeah. I'm smiling very much because I definitely had those conversations with people as well. So it's like, and I've got to tell you, as a former parent, have those conversations with my children's administration and such, because it's like, come on, I know you're going to wink at me or something, because that class is not where my child belongs. And
Right,
because
right.
there's a difference between these two teachers
Right,
here and how they
right.
go about doing class. So
And what they teach and how they
Yes.
teach it and everything. So Rick Dufour said that was an educational lottery. That's what it was. So the second question is, well, how will we know if they've learned it? And like I said, my first year of report cards illustrated this, and the determination of how do you write your name illustrated that. This is about common assessments that need to be given so that you can make sure that students learn it. And this is where early childhood teachers kind of get in a flux. Common assessments, whatever. And I talked about this already, but it's important that the teachers write the assessments themselves. I'm not a test writer. It's not about being a test writer. It's about making sure that your students have learned something. So you, as a team, decide how you're going to assess that. And none of this is written in stone. The essential standards aren't written in stone. The next year you can tweak them and change them. Common assessments. If the assessment doesn't work, well, let's rewrite it. Let's be honest and let's do something different. But it's important that all the teachers give the same common assessment. Sometimes there's even a script that goes with it, so they say the same thing. For example, one teacher says, spell cat. The other teacher says, spell cat. Two different ways to assess. So, and one teacher says, when they're doing like letter recognition, I count to 3 and I go to the next letter. And the other teacher says, well, I just wait as long as I can until they start crying. I mean, it's just that's not equitable. So assessments need to be equitable. And then teachers need to look at the results. Just don't give the assessment. You need to look at the results as a team together. How come all of your kids can do this and mine didn't do very well? What did you do? Did you stand on your head when you explained it, or what did you do? I had a teacher who, her class knew all 52 sight words at the end of kindergarten. Every single one of her kids did. I was like, what did you do? Oh, I just talked about them a lot and showed them it every day. No, what did you do? She said, well, I had flashcards, and before they left the room, they had to tell me what the word was. Another teacher said, well, I could do that. Just never thought of it. Not that you're not a good teacher. Sometimes we get stuck in the same things we do and we just don't think about it. So those conversations teachers have are so important. What did you do? Exactly. She put all the words in the bathroom, so the kids could see them on the walls. They had to come out and tell her a word they saw.
That's funny.
Just little things. So I think that's really important.
Most definitely. Sorry. That's a good one. I like that, having it in the bathroom.
Yeah. The third one is, what will we do if they've not learned it? We just won't go on because we have to be on page 72 of the scope and sequence by October 17th. What will our system be? What will our protocol be for helping these children and making sure that they have learned something they have not mastered, especially skills that are important for the next level? If they don't learn their ABCs, they're not going to learn how to read. So we have to be really clear on that. And there's many different protocols for that. You can say, how did your kids learn this? Let me try that. Or why don't you take these 3 students who didn't learn this and you were good at it, you teach them that for 10 minutes today, and I'll take the other kids. Lots of different systems and protocols for interventions, for RTI interventions. And you can do that with young children just as easily as with 3rd graders. And the last one is what about the kids who already know it? We kind of don't think about them.
Not at all.
My one year I had the teachers do before school, the first day of school, and just a quick assessment on letter recognition. And one teacher came and said, all 18 of my kids except one know every letter of the alphabet. I said, oh, okay, so what are you going to do? She said, I don't know. I always did a letter of the week. Well, you were doing a letter of the week for kids who already knew this when you could have been doing something else. And it was just like a light bulb turned on. She's like, yeah. So sometimes teachers are a little afraid to change up what they've always done. So we have to give them room to do that and, and room to fail because they learn from that. So, but we also have to think about those kids who already know it and continue to challenge them and continue to give them the opportunity to learn something new. So those are the 4 essential questions. And that's what all your collaborative team meetings focus on.
Love it. Awesome. And I have to say this at the end is that the last one, finding out, what to do to change what you're doing if they get it already. I'm one of those kids in 4th grade where they sent me to the library for a little bit of time, it's like, well, I don't know, tout myself because I had enough problems of other types, but it's like, who came up with that plan? It's like, nice, we'll just remove you and you can go over there and read and do something.
Yeah, so you can go do that. And that's what we do with a lot of kids who've already learned it. So,
right. Well, thanks for sharing that. It's so important. One of the things that moving through the book in chapter 3, collaborative teams in early childhood programs is the title. What do teams look like in early childhood programs? Why are they important?
They're important so teachers have the same group of people to collaborate with and talk to about their children, not your children or my children, but their children. And it's about grouping together classroom teachers and giving them time to collaborate. So, for example, you might have, I had 15 kindergarten teachers, and if they all got together in one team meeting, it was just crazy. So we had 3 separate teams, 5 teachers each. So they could work together and talk about their kids. You can group together all the 3-year-old teachers, all the 4-year-old teachers. And if you only have one preschool program in your district or in your building, there are ways where you could get together with other teachers in other school districts or at other buildings. You can Zoom other people, but you need to be able to talk to and collaborate with people who teach the same thing alike. And then we had vertical teams where once a month the teachers would get together with the grade above or below you. So kindergarten teacher would be on a team and sit and talk with 1st grade teachers and preschool teachers. Those 3 would get together. It's important. It's important to know what the 1st grade teachers are doing and what, we talked about, spiders or something, and the kindergarten teacher said, well, we do that. And the 1st grade teacher said, no, we do that. Well, that's part of your science curriculum, but why are you both doing it? So we learn things like that. The other way is that all the PE teachers should get together. And so if you're doing it district-wide, they get together with everyone. You also have teams that are teams that contain the classroom teacher, the special ed teacher, the speech and language therapist, the occupational therapist. And so those are more special education teams for students. And those types of groups can get together. It's just important that teachers have the opportunity to talk to other people who teach what they teach and do. I never talked to those 2 teachers down the hall in kindergarten. Man, they shut the door and that was it. And those kids came out of those classrooms with stuff. I was like, wow, you did that? I wish I would have known. I would have done that. So, I think that's important to be able to give teachers the time and the opportunity to get together and talk with each other about those things. There's a lot of research out there that supports high-performing teams and their impact on student learning. These teams are the force behind superior teaching and learning. This is how good teachers become great teachers, by being on a collaborative team. because teams help articulate what learning looks like for their students. So that team piece is really important.
Yeah, that's awesome. Because there's nothing better than when you find out this thing called the neighbor.
Yeah.
It's like what a resource, man. It's like, and of course then there might be the neighbor that no, we're good, okay. But it's funny how you open that door and this new world happens. And so by making it happen where they have the access to each other through those teams, what a powerful tool. I can't speak enough.
The other
about
piece
that.
is what you learn about your neighbor is that sharing what you have. We had one teacher who he didn't share the good stuff.
Nice.
He only shared some of the stuff, and he kept the good stuff for himself because he wanted to be that teacher who had the good stuff. No, not good. That's not collaborating.
Not at all.
Yeah, he shared the good. Yeah,
that's one of the things that you have to you have to acknowledge in education as you go through this. There are certain things that would make great different cartoons or fodder for many, because one of them is stuff like that where I won't share the good stuff with you. Or my favorite thing was when someone left, then really quick there are people that would go into those classrooms and
just get all the stuff.
Yes, exactly. Get all the stuff, like good furniture. Trade out this and that, or keep this and that.
Being a principal for 17 years and being involved in the professional learning community process for 17 years gave me a lot of really good stories, a lot of really good, things to relate, real life relate. It's not just, oh, she's just writing about this, but let me tell you about that.
I like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah. I had a teacher who didn't share the good stuff. I had to talk to him about it. Make him share the good stuff.
I can imagine. That's just a chapter alone on itself right there. You will share the good stuff.
Yeah, you will share the good stuff.
So let's talk about shifting a school or program from a focus on teaching students to students learning. How difficult is that? And got any little magical potion there that help you make that happen?
It's a shift. It's a paradigm shift because, like I said, I was given a scope and sequence, and they said, here you go. Be on this page at this time. That was how we did it back then. But the shift from teaching to learning has profound implications. Like I said, teachers that work together improve student learning. So they need to develop a growth mindset and really think about, has the child learned it? Like I said, if a child doesn't learn the letters of the alphabet, they're not going to learn how to read. So it's really important. Just because you taught it doesn't mean they've learned it. And so you have to really dig into that. It's a shift from teaching to learning. It's a shift from what was taught to what was learned. It's a shift from coverage of content to demonstration of proficiency. It's a shift from private practice to open sharing of practice. It's a shift from these are my kids and those are your kids to these are our kids. And it's a shift from each teacher assigning priority to certain standards to establishing priority standards. Some teachers would think this standard is really important and I have a really good unit on it, so I'm going to really work on this one. Where another teacher wouldn't think it was. And so there's that inequity. And that's why you have to really focus on children learning the same things. Great organizations simplify a complex world into a single organizing idea. Just one idea, a basic principle or a basic concept that guides everything. And I think that's one of the basic guiding principles about professional learning communities. Do I want my students to learn this? Always keep it in the back of your mind. I could walk into a classroom and know what essential standard they were teaching. If I walked into a classroom and they were doing a dinosaur unit, so I'm not telling you have to teach exactly the same way, But I could walk into a classroom and they'd be doing the dinosaur unit, and I go, what essential standards, what are the kids learning? And if you can't tell me, or if the child can't tell me what they're learning, and it's not an essential standards, you're kind of wasting your time. And I'm not saying that you don't teach all of the standards there are, but you make sure that they learn the ones you have deemed most important, the ones that your collaborative team has deemed the most important. So
that is awesome. Because that's identifying and just even having those discussions about what's important and what's not. That takes it to a whole different level,
right.
Because there's purpose to your. It sounds bad what I'm about to say, but there's purpose to your colleagues
Right.
as opposed to just the person you say, "Hey, how you doing today?" and then you go in and close your door. And
right.
Because at some point you're as a team going to have that discussion about what are we doing to help Steve or to help
right.
Paulina or whatever, and because they're struggling here and they're those conversations together is just so important in trying to help the kids figure out to help you help the kids, I guess
right.
is my point.
And it takes a while for collaborative teams to really work because you have to develop trust. I had one teacher who would be in the meeting and say, okay, you guys, you're not going to like this, but I'm going to say it anyhow. And that's important. Or you're going to be mad at me, but I'm going to say this because it's the elephant in the room, and not talking about it in the parking lot after the meeting. So collaborative teams are really important. It just takes, you have to develop trust.
Oh, so important. So important.
Yeah.
Love that. We could talk an entire episode about that.
Right. Yeah.
All right. So you've talked about this, but I want to, as we're finishing up, I want to make sure that we go back to it again, which is if a colleague came to you and said, I hear what you're saying, but I'm not you. I can't do this. What would you tell that colleague?
I think it's important that teachers build shared knowledge together and that they learn together. So that's the only way that they can shift their mindset. There's an abundance of research and evidence-based research that has created a compelling argument in support of professional learning communities. So I think you need to look at the research. You need to look at the schools who have, become professional learning communities and understand, like, we know this works. Doug Reeves did a study, a 90 study on 90 schools in Milwaukee that were low performing, where 90 of the kids were free and reduced lunch and 90 of the kids were second language learners, English learners. And after several years, 90% of the kids met or achieved standards in English language arts. And why? He points out that because the teachers determined what the most essential standards were. The teachers talked about their teaching, and the teachers, made sure that kids learned it. And so there's proof out there that functioning like this does work. And you have to build shared knowledge, and then build shared knowledge of key assumptions and critical practices. And you can do this by starting with collaborative teams, where you can read some articles or look at some research and talk about it and reflect on it. This is a journey. This is not a marathon. And from what professional learning communities looked like in my school in 2001 to what they looked like in 2016 were way different. So it's a growth process. And like I said, it's a marathon. I think, starting with one thing at a time, learning together, and maybe starting with just collaborative teams, and stop talking about what we're going to do for the Halloween parade and what's going to be on the school supply list, and start talking about the importance of correctly forming your letters, or talk about what are the most important shapes for a young child to know, or talking about, how to correctly hold a crayon or a pencil. Those are things that teachers need to start talking about. And you'll get the big blabbermouths in there controlling the whole situation. So in the beginning, you make up some norms that are important for the meeting to run smoothly. And I attended a lot of the first meetings just to make sure it got kept on track and to try to get the input from all team members. But after years, I never went to the meetings. I just got results of their work and their agendas and came when they needed help on something. So, but it takes time. It's a marathon.
That's awesome. It does take time. And I think it's so awesome what you just described. Barbara, this is cool. Where can listeners reach out to you, find additional information, connect, and learn more?
Well, I'm not a big techie and I don't have my own webpage. Maybe I should do that. I don't know. I'm retired and I play with my grandchildren a lot. So, which is great because they're 1, 3, and 5. And they're right.
Nice.
My area of expertise, so to speak. But anyhow, my email is out there for anyone who wants to connect with me, or, they can go through Solution Tree and I can work with groups. And I really like working with teachers of young children because I believe this is where it all starts and where kids really learn to love school and love to be students. So, and if you have a bad experience in preschool, kindergarten, first grade, you're marked for life. It's really difficult to change that. So just email me. I'm open.
Cool. And I'll put your email in the show notes so it's easy for them to find.
Sure.
So I got one last question for you, Barbara, and it goes like this. Do you have a teacher in your past who made a difference in your life? If so, who was it? And what would you say if given the chance to say thank you?
I really had to think about that because I went to a Catholic school and in my first grade, there were 60 kids. Can you imagine? 60 kids. And I knew that because I was 59 because my last name began with a W then. And so fortunately, I was one of the smart kids. But when I really thought about it, there was a 7th grade teacher. This is really weird. There was a 7th grade teacher, math teacher that I had, Mr. Pantelis. I even remember his name. I could not get absolute value. I couldn't understand it. It was very frustrating for me. I couldn't get it. He stuck with me until I got it. So I learned that everybody can learn something. Some things take more time, some things come easily, but everybody can learn something. So as a teacher, I learned that every child's going to learn how to read. They can learn how to read. They can learn how to read and comprehend. And for some, it may take longer and be harder. And for some, it will be easier. But the absolute value thing still sticks in my mind.
That's cool. That's very cool.
Weird, but
it makes sense though. That someone would work with you until you got it. So that's
until
cool.
I got it. And I was like, oh, I get it. Oh, I get it now. Okay.
It's so important.
I love that when that light bulb goes on with little ones where they get it. Ooh.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I got to tell you the same with high schoolers. There's nothing better than you're in there and you get it. You see when they get it.
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Barbara, thank you so much for talking with us and sharing your work with PLCs at the early childhood level and your book, Success for Our Youngest Learners, Embracing the PLC at Work Process at the Early Childhood Level. Awesome focus, awesome information for addressing student learning. Wishing you the best in all you do.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, you have been listening to Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12, a podcast to help you help kids achieve their dreams. Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 is a member of the Education Podcast Network. Podcasts for educators, podcasts by educators. Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 is a member of the podcast network based in Canada called Voice Ed Radio. Voice Ed Radio, your voice is right here. The opinions expressed on Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 are those of the guests and host. Teaching Learning Leading K-12 is intended to share ideas, advice, and suggestions. Teaching Learning Leading K-12 is produced for educational purposes. Hey, thanks for listening. It would be awesome if you visited my website at stephenmiletto.com and connected with me, left a review, and listened to more episodes. And by the way, you could also share it with your friends, with your family, and your colleagues. Thanks so much. You're awesome.